When you think of pure luxury, what comes to mind? For a lot of people, it's caviar. Those tiny, perfect, glistening pearls of flavor, they've been the ultimate symbol of opulence for centuries. But the story of where your caviar comes from today? Oh, it is not what you think. It's an incredible tale of a species on the brink, a massive global farming boom, and a total reinvention of what luxury even means. All right, let's get into it. And that right there, that's the big question, isn't it? The whole legend of caviar was built on these huge, wild sturgeon from places like the Caspian Sea. But those wild fish nearly disappeared, so the industry had this choice: either adapt, or this amazing delicacy was gone forever. So where is today's billion-dollar supply actually coming from? You're probably going to be surprised by the answer.
To really get the revolution that happened, first you have to understand the problem. It was this huge clash between the romantic story of caviar and, well, some very harsh reality. So on one side, you've got the myth, right? The story we've all heard. This food so rare and exclusive that way back in the Middle Ages, King Edward II literally declared sturgeon a royal fish. It could only be eaten by the monarch. But the reality today, it's a totally different story. The fish that make this amazing product are critically endangered. It got so bad that CITES, the international body that protects endangered species, had to step in with super strict rules to keep them from being completely wiped out. The old way of doing things, it just wasn't going to work anymore.
Okay, so if you can't catch them in the wild, what do? Well, the industry had to get creative, and it led to this massive global boom in a whole new way of producing caviar.
And here it is. The answer is aquaculture. The entire modern caviar business exists because of sturgeon farming. Instead of chasing a disappearing resource, people started raising sturgeon in these controlled environments all over the world. And this didn't just save the industry, it completely changed it, making caviar accessible in ways nobody ever thought possible. And the scale of this change is just wow. Look at this chart from 2020. It shows you who the new heavyweights are. You see some of the old school players like Russia, but then there's China. And they are producing a staggering amount. It just dwarfs everybody else. So just how dominant are we talking?
84%. Let that sink in. In 2020, China was responsible for 84% of all farmed sturgeon in the entire world. That is a massive seismic shift for a luxury market that was always centered on Europe. And it happened fast, too. They built up their own sturgeon stocks after first importing eggs back in the early 2000s.
But here's the twist. Even with all that market power, they had a perception problem. A report from the European Market Observatory found that a lot of brands were kind of hesitant to slap a Made in China label on their caviar tins. They were worried that fancy foreign consumers might be skeptical. So what did they do? They quietly partnered up with famous chefs and dealers, and their caviar made its way into the world's best restaurants, often without anyone at the table knowing where it came from. But you know, this whole farming boom isn't just about the eggs. Once you're raising the whole fish, you start to realize there's value in every single part of it. It turns out the sturgeon meat itself is super popular, especially in Russia. There's this traditional Siberian dish called stroganina, where they serve these paper-thin slices of raw frozen sturgeon. And it gets even wilder. The whole luxury vibe of caviar has jumped over to the skincare world. You can now buy these super high-end anti-aging creams that use caviar extracts and even sturgeon DNA, promising all sorts of rejuvenating effects. Okay, so we've seen the huge global picture. Now, let's zoom right in on one company to see how all this stuff plays out in the real world. And this one's a really cool story about sustainability in Switzerland. So this is the world we're talking about, the absolute top of the top. Michelin-starred restaurants, 5-star hotels, first-class airline seats. This is where quality and a good story are everything. And this is exactly the market that a Swiss producer named Una Caviar set its sights on. And boy, did they succeed. Just look at that number. In 1 year, Una Caviar saw its sales for fish and caviar shoot up by a massive 117%. Now, that doesn't just happen by accident. That was all part of a very, very smart plan. So how'd they do it? What was their secret? Well, first, they had a great story about sustainability, raising their fish in the pure waters of the Swiss mountains. Second, they went straight for that high-end airline and fine dining crowd right from the start. And third, they did something really innovative. They created a new kind of fish feed that uses omega-3s from algae instead of from fish oil. That was a huge step for making fish farming more sustainable. But just when this new farmed caviar world was really hitting its groove, a global crisis came along that threatened to pull the rug out from under the entire industry.
The pandemic basically shut down their most important customers overnight.
And this is where we saw just how fast the industry could move. Their main customers were gone, so producers had to pivot, and they did it fast. They boosted their online stores to sell straight to all of us stuck at home. They changed their packaging, switching from those big restaurant tins to these little 10 and 30-gram jars, perfect for a treat at home. And they got creative with things like click and collect, making it easier than ever to get a little taste of luxury during lockdown.
That whole pandemic period was a massive test, a real trial by fire. But the industry came out the other side totally transformed, with a new idea of who its customers were and maybe even a new definition of luxury itself.
So what's the caviar market look like now? Well, it's not just about how rare it is anymore. Now it's about sustainable, reliable farming. It's about being able to get it, buying it directly from the producer. And more, it's about transparency, about knowing exactly where your food is coming from. And this is really the key. That big shift to selling directly to people during the pandemic seems to be here to stay. Just like the UMA4 report says, when you can buy straight from the farm, you feel way more confident about what you're getting. And that demand for honesty and transparency, that might be one of the biggest changes to come out of the whole crisis.
Which leaves us with this final big idea to think about. For hundreds of years, luxury meant rare. But what happens when technology can make rare things not so rare anymore? What does luxury even mean then? Maybe, just maybe, the story of caviar shows us that true luxury isn't about what's hard to find. Maybe it's about something that's made with care, with honesty, and with a story you can actually believe in.